All right. We are live. Hello,
Hello.
hello. All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Unicorn Connector Show, where we are going to talk about relationships, revenue, referrals, and how the different elements of the unicorn DNA tie everybody into being a connector. I'm really excited for today as we are discussing an interesting topic about our connections, as well as empowering women and children through experiential therapies, including art and virtual reality therapy with Aubrey Baptista. So, Aubrey is the perfect person for today's show, as this week is focused on unicorns being able to let go and have a good time and be themselves. So, I figured who better than Aubrey to talk about this, as she is the founder and CEO of Kindred Art Therapy and Counseling, a board certified art therapist, and a licensed clinical mental health counselor and qualified supervisor. Quite the mouthful, but Aubrey is amazing. Aubrey is amazing. She's doing innovative therapies within the art and virtual reality space and is taking what she's learned from her own experiences and sharing with others to be a role model for other moms, women, and children struggling with the negative aspects of neurodiversity. So, Aubrey, thank you so much for being here today and welcome to the show, everybody.
Thank you so much for having me today, Daniel. Sometimes I have a hard time putting all together what I do, right? And I really loved the bio that you wrote because I read it and I was like, that fits. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was struggling just to type it all up and put it in the graphics, and I'm like, man, Aubrey is just so well versed and experienced, and definitely honored to have you here. You've been an amazing unicorn in the unicorn universe community, and we're really excited to have you here.
Yeah, one of the reasons that I really love the unicorn universe is just first of all, like I grew up watching all types of shows and things related to magic, and I always just really enjoyed magic and that um, style of thinking about things. I did work in a psychiatric hospital, so I do have to say that we have to be careful of the magical thinking realm of things, But
Yeah.
I'm not worried about that in this case, right? So I really enjoy just the idea of being able to fulfill people's dreams through connections. And I have been experiencing so much inspiration and so many, I have all of these certificates and education and background that I've gathered along the way, but I didn't have any kind of business knowledge going in. I mean, I had some from what I had experienced, but I didn't have entrepreneurial experience, There's
Yeah.
not that many people around me that are doing that. And so or at least not that I was super connected with. And so you've really highlighted and modeled for me how to go about some of those connections and just incorporating more of that into my practice.
Got it. Well, I love that, and I think it, like we were talking about just a few minutes ago. I think it all just ties everything together, right? Just being able to let go and be yourself and have a good time, however you experience that or express it. When I was writing it up, I was just kind of reflecting on the topic and everything that we're here to talk about today and how it relates to connectors and just that you're able to have a much better time when you let go and however you express yourself, be it through writing. A lot of people like to write, a lot of people like to create art or music or even crunch numbers. Everybody has their own thing, so I think that is super important that we have you on. And yeah, so why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself? And hey, everybody in the chat, this is meant to be interactive, so if you have questions as we go along, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll highlight some of them, and put where you're from and put a unicorn in the chat because I like to see who all is here. So Aubrey, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you get into this, and why have you gone down the entrepreneurial journey?
So if we back up the story all the way to, early childhood, I can say that like I really struggled with like I've always been like an outgoing person, but early on I really struggled with like saying things that were not appropriate in certain situations. Um Sometimes that still comes out. Uh, and it took me a really long time to get to a point where I felt more secure in myself, and I wasn't doing that anymore. And it was this sort of like blind journey of like, what's wrong with me, right? Why am I doing this? Like, why am I sabotaging myself? And um, like a lot of blame towards the people around me for mistreating me, for not living up to like the roles that they should be living up to. And without going into like a lot of detail about that, like just basically like that intergenerational trauma survivor story is basically like, grandparents before then passing down like their anger and the way that they parent to then my parents, and then them, passing that on to me, and then creating a lot of shame in me, and not really like teaching me like a better way, and so it created a lot of pain. That's really emotional pain is what it comes down to. And um like an earlier through line in my life was that I really enjoyed art. And actually, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an artist for Disney.
Hmm.
And so I, but then at the same time, I also had people saying, like, you can't be an artist for Disney, or, if you want to be an artist for Disney, you're going to have to do X, Y, and Z, and it's going to be really hard. And not many people make a life as an artist. Like, I grew up in the 90s. So, like, they didn't really know back then how much the internet was going to change things,
Mm.
So a lot of things that people predicted back then about what was going to be lucrative, or like everything is like kind of been turned on its head. So, my journey and my path was really about like self-discovery and figuring out like, how could I be whole? How could I find connections in the world, genuine connections? How could I heal myself so that I could show up and be there in those connections? Because like the struggles and the traumas and the anxieties and the ways that I like struggled, and ways that I still continue to struggle in ways like that, those things just continue to live on in me. And I had to figure out a way to be in relationship with people without hurting people. Does, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I think so part of what I kind of wanted to ask about is some of the things you're doing in the VR space. It's interesting because you had asked me just a few days ago, how I imagined AI to take some sort of position when it comes to making connections, right? So I think that part of this conversation, I'm curious to know what you think the future has in store with interacting with people, and how that's going to affect the energy that we have when we're connecting with people, and if we can have like a similar type of connection through a virtual reality space as we can in person. So those are just, I don't know, some of the things that I'm kind of curious about. But yeah, I guess I'm curious to know, you know, from some of the experiences that you had, um, what's like the main reason that you wanted to go down this path? Is it just the experiences that you had doing art and had people, you know, throwing limited beliefs at you, kind of projecting it onto yourself? Like, what kind of made you decide to go in that direction?
For VR, for going in the direction of VR.
Well, specifically, the mental health space and incorporating art into the therapy that you are helping people
Okay,
with.
so the reason that I really wanted to connect art into the therapy that I was doing really came down to burnout, right? So I told you that I worked in a psychiatric hospital. That was actually where I met somebody who was an art therapist, and I learned about the whole world of art therapy. I didn't know that it even existed, but like I said, like I had earlier on in my life, I had wanted to be an artist and I had taken some art classes. So, but those critics on the outside saying that that wasn't going to be a possibility for my future. So then when I graduated with my psychology degree and I knew that I needed to find something that was going to be the next step, because like I wasn't sure how I was going to like I wanted to go into the therapy world, but I didn't want to face all the burnout, and I didn't really know about how like there's like a certificate process on the other side of it where you could probably add on certain certificates and things like that. I really wanted to be fully immersed in like the world of art therapy, where I would be able to bring the art that was like really connecting and healing for me, and then also expand that so that I could bring that into the space with the clients. And I knew that that was something that was going to be effective, because when I was working in the psychiatric hospital, one of the things that I was doing was bringing like nail painting supplies and actually painting on the residents' nail, not residents, they were patients, like different designs and things like that. And that like one-on-one and that connectivity through that was really like what helped solidify like this is going to be my path. Just like how much enjoyment that they got from that and the special attention and yeah.
That's cool. I love that. So, what are some other types of therapies that you will take people through? I'm curious to kind of know more about how you facilitate the art therapies. What does that look like?
So it depends on who I'm working with, because when I'm working with children, they come here. This is, part of my house here. It's just a partition part of the garage, like secrets out. But everybody knows that who comes here. I let them know that before they come here. And like anybody who's worked with me has no issue with it that I know of. Please tell me if you do. And yeah, so the kids come in here and I give them a choice right now. I say to them, hey, like, do we want to sit and make art? Do we want to go into virtual reality? Do we want to just sit and talk? Because some of the kids just want to sit and talk sometimes, and that's fine. Or do we want to play a game? So I'll give them a few options to choose from. And the kids like having options, because it gives them a little bit of structure and like something to grab onto. But then they get that freedom of choice and the autonomy in my space. And so then we can explore from there what goes on. And then depending on like when I first meet with a kid, I might kind of just get like a good like visual of them. And maybe I've already like, of course I do. I always learn like a little bit of information about the parents beforehand and the situation that the child is coming from. But so like going into it, I generally know like there's a few types of activities that we may end up doing. And one of my favorites is called like a shared drawing. And it's an opportunity to sit and to connect with one another through art. And so I did one with a client of mine last week and he said that he really enjoyed it. He's 17, so he's kind of past the age where we would need something like that, right? Because like we do sit and talk a lot in therapy, but sometimes I feel like when we're talking, it's like surface level. And so I want to kind of go deeper in the relationship. And so I use the art to do that. So like when my style of art is very like go with the flow. And so it's never really like I start sometimes like starting out with a full image in mind, like, and then trying to recreate that. That's not the type of art that I'm doing. It's more like, I want to know like what the sensation is. I want to connect to like what I'm feeling in that moment and just try to stay in the moment and be mindful. And so, I might create something, right? Just like a squiggle and like some circles or something like that, right? And then he takes a turn and does some squiggles and, something else, right? Like he's going to fill in the space. And it's interesting to see while we're going back and forth, like some of the content that's coming up for the client, and sometimes I might just make mental note of it. Sometimes I might ask questions about it. It's never in a way that's judging. It's always in a way that is just curious and trying to draw them deeper and think more about the way that they think and think more about the way that they make decisions, right? Sometimes they think that I'm asking them silly questions,
Yeah.
and to me, it's more just about helping them develop that metacognitive skill of being able to like self-reflect.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And we have Bruce Carnahan. He said, "Love the go with the flow of energy created." That's a nice approach. Yeah, I really like that too. I mean, just having that flexibility to do whatever you're feeling, I'm sure that really gives you a lot of insight into whoever it is that you're drawing with. And I love the interactive component of it too. That's really cool.
Yeah, I like doing that, and I like different because with the expressive therapies continuum, which is a model that I follow, there's the ability to explore both top down and bottom up processes.
Okay.
Right. So what that means is like within the nervous system, we're going to be holding certain tension, kind of like a lot of people know nowadays, like that when you go into yoga, one of the things that they talk to you about is like holding trauma in your body, and how when you move and you change the way that your body is, that like you will be able to release some of that. Well, like same kind of principle applies with different types of media, right? That like if you have something that's very sensory based and you kind of like move it around on the paper, that can help like release more emotion. Whereas like if you're trying to contain more emotion, you might use like pencil. So, I've been trained in all of the different like ways that this applies, if that makes sense. And yeah, so kind of going back to what you're saying with like that go with the flow, and like how that training has helped like informed that.
Interesting. So what kind of training have you needed to go through for everything that you're doing?
So in order for anybody to practice art therapy, you could go to like Lesley University or any other art therapy institution that, for licensed clinical mental health counseling, specialization in art therapy. Like there's a bunch of them out there that you can look into. But specifically in my case, like I said, I went to Lesley. I had a kind of winding path because like I can never decide on what I want to do until I'm sort of like pushed into where I'm going. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, or like, it's like I'm drawn to something, but then something else is drawing me at the same time, So I ended up in I ended up in 2 therapeutic boarding schools, working there. And I'd say like I'd highlight working at the last one that I was at because they had such like out of all the places that I worked, they did community the best. And I still just really love the model that they had there of being able to help children and families. And the CEO who was running that school, like the head president, whatever you call her, the person who runs the school is, one of the role models in my mind of like who I want to be like,
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense.
But training and certifications. Okay, so we went through all the list earlier, right? So, all right, so art therapy. Okay, I had to take a board certification test a couple months ago. It was the hardest test of my life. I got a couple pointers for test takers. Like, one of them was I changed the coloring on the screen because I know that my visual cortex is going to be really taxed if I'm sitting there in front of a computer screen and it's like a bright white light. It's like the same idea as a lot of people are wearing like blue light glasses now. Sorry, I didn't bring my blue light glasses. I was there and I was like, how can I change this? So I changed it to salmon. And then I had the little doodle pad in front of me, and I literally every 2 to 3 questions, like I would look away from the questions and I would look down at the doodle pad so that I could literally like clear my mental chalkboard, you know, because I can literally feel it. I think I mentioned I have ADHD and I can literally feel it like when my brain gets taxed. It feels like, you know, tension. So
Yeah.
and it happens pretty like all of a sudden. So the 3.5 hours that I was sitting for that exam were like, yeah. So that was one art therapy board certification. And then the qualified supervisor, I also got that this year. I had to be a licensed clinical mental health counselor in North Carolina for 5 years. And that was since I got the associate's license. So basically the counseling track, the way that it works is like, once you graduate, then you have to, if you're living in North Carolina, like I am, every state is different. So once you graduate and you get an associate's license, and then you work under the supervision of somebody that either your employer provides them or you have to pay for them. So anyway, lots of details about all the ways that you get all of these certifications.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it seems like definitely a lot of work. So I think it's really cool. And so I'm curious, you know, when it comes to some of the VR stuff that you've been doing, how do you think virtual reality might come into play in our lives, you know, when connecting with others and, you know, how and with what you're doing specifically? I'm curious kind of what you think is to come from all of that.
Okay, so this is a really big question.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's a big one.
Well, start wherever you want.
I'm really excited about virtual reality therapy. It's funny because like before, maybe like 2 or 3 months ago, like maybe a little bit longer, 3 or 4 months, something like that. Like within the last quarter was really when like the spark for virtual reality kind of took off in me. And it started because of somebody else's suggestion. And then I brought it to the Unicorn Universe. And then Michael shared with me like some of his thoughts and ideas. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to figure out how to make this happen. You know? And so I had kind of had it in the wings that I was working with this one company that specifically they provide virtual reality exposure therapy. So based in like helping people reduce fears and so like, you know, I can put somebody on a stage and help them work through like a speech, you know. I can have somebody who is afraid of heights be able to like go up the side of a building and, you know, decrease their fear of heights. I can have somebody who's afraid of planes like go through a sequence that's like going to the airport, in the airport, you know, like we're on the plane, like, and helping them work through breathing activities to help reduce that levels of anxiety so that when they actually face that situation, they've already played out those tools. So it's much more accessible and easy for them to use those tools once they go somewhere. You know, it's a fully immersive experience. So it tricks your brain into thinking that it's real, you know?
Yeah.
So that's one way that I'm using it. And then there's a company that I just started consulting with. So anybody who's following me on LinkedIn, you go visit my page. I posted about it. This company called Alter Learning, and they approached me through LinkedIn because of my interest in virtual reality and cross sections of art therapy and working with kids. And, you know, basically the specializations that I have are kind of unique. And they wanted my help consulting on game development specifically for kids to help them learn. But then what they're using this game for is that they're gathering information about the kid's emotional state and then being able to run that through algorithms that can identify like a suggested diagnosis that can then be shared with anybody that the family gives permission to. So this is going to revolutionize the access that kids have to mental health and families have to mental health through the school system. It's going to be able to link everybody in a way that hasn't happened before.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, so I first experienced how virtual reality could actually alter, our state of mind from getting past a limiting belief factor like being afraid of heights or something along those lines. This was maybe, I don't know, a couple of years ago, and I think we've either connected you with or need to connect you with James at Jump, which is this simulated wingsuit experience where you have this VR headset on. You walk up to a platform and you literally jump. You have to actually jump. And then they suspend you midair and blast high-powered wind at you to simulate that experience, actual wingsuit flying. So that was kind of my first experience with it. And I just think that, with what you're doing with it is going to be game changing for just humanity in general, really, because if we can help people get past those limiting beliefs, some thinking that something is a physical disability when actually it's a mental disability, if you can actually get through that, like, I just think that's so awesome, and I can speak to it because the first time I did that jump thing, the first time I did it was at like a conference and I was just on the platform. I was shaking. But then when I did the actual full simulation and I jumped, the first thing that came to my mind after that was I want to do the real thing. Like, how incredible is that? Never in a million years, and I still will not do that in real life. But like, for that to be my first next thought, like, just just thinking about how what you're doing can be so revolutionary in our world, So I don't know. That's just kind of my experience with it.
Did you come out whooping like woo?
Yeah, I mean, I was like, let's go again, 100%. So I'm curious, like, how long do you think it would take before we really are helping people get past those kind of things, or is it already happening?
Getting past limiting beliefs?
Yeah, like using VR to get past, certain obstacles that are a mental block that might feel physical, like a physical disability.
So VR is just one tool,
Right.
right? And the other thing that I like about VR is the potential for it to take spaces like this, like Zoom or things like, like when we're talking on a 2D screen, and then bring us into like a 3D space so that we would be able to actually share space in VR. And
Mm-hmm.
that's one way that I think that it's going to increase connectivity. Another way is like being able to use VR to help work through like traumas. Like one of the ideas that I have that I'm going to try to figure out how to develop one way or the other is having people in VR being able to do actual like body tracings and actual imagery around like what's going on within them, and then be able to put it out like so that they can manipulate it. And then there's studies that have been done that when you can see the change happen in front of you, then that can then like actually transform the way that you think about it and the way that you experience it. So kind of a circular way of getting back to your answer around limiting beliefs. This is kind of where I wanted to go based on what we were talking about before around like one thing that I struggle with is somebody put it to me this way, and I don't mean to like spread this around, but the idea of like toxic positivity. And I was trying to figure out what that means. And from observing, like what I can see is it's like when almost like we go around saying to everybody, just be positive, just be positive, oh, like we're going to say all these positive affirmations, right? But then we don't actually get real with like what's going on that's causing people to struggle in a moment, you know, and really kind of just be there with them in that and help them and to help soothe them and then help give them the tools so that they can help soothe themselves. Because people are not naturally wanting to be negative. Like the people that are like, oh, yeah, they're just like that and they've been like that forever. Like that's probably true, but they probably have traumas on top of traumas on top of traumas that are causing that for them.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes we do have to put our distance between people like that because like we have to be able to hold ourselves up and maintain our own, you know, sanity and everything. And that's really sad because it's important that we also engage with those people who are struggling, who maybe don't have as many resources. That was really long and circuitous. Help get me back on track, Daniel.
No, you're good. Well, I'm, everything that you have to say is very interesting. And I, had an interview with Freeman Beals where it was all focused around positivity, right? But sometimes you're totally right. You do need to address what might be bringing you down. And I'm curious, like, what if you have any ways for people that maybe they're having a rough time without just shutting it down? What are some things that you recommend people do in order to kind of reflect on that and potentially get out of that funk so that they're not just faking their positivity, but they actually get out of it into a more positive mindset? Do you have any suggestions?
So, unfortunately, what happens is that people have these struggles and their brain and, you know, their pride and all these things. The first thing that happens is people want to withdraw. They want to, hide the fact that they're struggling. They want to go away. They don't want to know anybody, that they don't want to let anybody know that that's what's going on, you know, and that's not going to be helpful. The idea of like crying alone is really sad. And unfortunately, too many of us do it. Like I know I do it because it was something that I guess was like taught that was how it was supposed to be. And it's so healing and so transformational. This is going to sound really morbid and sad, but I've told my clients before, like, it's kind of my job to make you cry because that's like something that to me, I know if you're crying, then like you're releasing that tension, that energy, that pain. It's like kind of my job to like sit there and to be with you in that. And like people apologize. They're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry that I'm crying." And I'm like, it's like the person who burps at dinner, you know? Like it's a compliment to the chef.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, well, and I mean, you seem like a great person to hold that safe space and, let people let go and just be real. I feel like that's so important. And this being the Unicorn Connector show, I think it relates to, when you're connecting with people, just being authentic and being yourself, right? And not being afraid of what other people are going to think of you. If you need to cry, ideally you find somebody that you can, be comfortable crying with, right? I mean, but I just think that it's really important. And so I love that you say that, you're not trying to get them to cry, right? But
No.
if they need to, they want to know that it's okay, so.
Yeah. And so there's like a balancing act there, right? Where like, I'm sometimes like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde in sessions, right? It's like, I'm holding space, right? And I'm letting you talk it out. And then you say something, and the way that you say it, I'm over here like cracking up. And then they're like, "Stop laughing at me." And I'm like, the way you're saying this right now is hilarious. Like, just listen to yourself and your ability to like make lemonade out of lemons, and like being able to like take something that is like truly painful, but then being able to like laugh about it, right? Some therapists are going to say, "Oh, well, that's like avoidance and yada yada." I'm like, I think that's resilience.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's interesting. So I wanted to talk about your mission that you had put down. I thought it was pretty interesting, and we have it scrolling on the bottom right now. Just that you have a mission to revolutionize mental health care through innovative counseling methods. So I am curious. You're doing some things through virtual reality. What are some other innovative types of approaches or things that you want to implement to do that, to achieve your mission?
So right now, it's kind of like I have this over here and this over here and this over here, And so my goal for 2023 is to continue to try to like bring them all together. And so it kind of, to answer your question, like it helps if I explained that when I first started kind of going down this path, there was a few different opportunities, like the path of becoming a private practice owner. That there was a few different opportunities that helped like bridge that gap for me within the counseling world, and I've been exploring those different things, like different marketing opportunities and different platforms that I can put my information on and that kind of stuff. And what I'm learning and realizing, like I've been taught this all along, but I haven't been exposed to it really until more recently, about how stratified the system is. So just in terms of, insurance and who can access insurance and who can't access insurance, and who are the type of people who do have insurance. And private insurance is very different than like publicly funded insurance, and the people that take those insurances, and then also like the world of coaching and like how many people can access care from anywhere in the world, you know so there's all these different like stratifications that I've been trying to figure out, like where do I fit into all of this, both for like my brand identity as well as just who do I want to help, and who do I most connect with. I'm still trying to figure that out a little bit, but one thing that I would like to try to help solve or to help get fixed is, so one of the problems that I've been noticing is that clinicians will come into private practice after having worked in an agency of types, and they're feeling burnt out from working with children and families because of just how much is involved in that. But then also the struggle of coming into private practice, paying for the overhead of an office, and having a child in the office with them, you know? And I'm in a unique position where I can offer people to be able to come over to my house. And so that's helping a lot with that. But one thing I would like to be able to do is have like a virtual office space that's specifically for kids, where they can enter into that virtual reality space, so that parents don't have to figure out in their busy schedules how are they going to drive 20 to 30 minutes or an hour or across the state, right, to be able to get their kids care. So that's
Interesting.
one of the big things that's right now pretty accessible, through this one platform that I'm using around like mindfulness-based therapy, exposure therapy. So
Interesting.
and then the other one is still developing.
Okay. So how does that work? Tell me more about that. I guess I'm curious to wrap my head around that.
So what it would look like if a kid were in a virtual space, right? So they would be like on Zoom with me. Their parent would be there with them because they have to help them with the technical aspects of things, either their parent or a guardian or a caretaker or somebody who can help facilitate getting they would have an app on their phone, so they would get instructions in advance to be able to access that app on their phone. They could take the phone and they could put it into like a $20 Amazon VR headset.
Mm-hmm.
And then it would put them into the space that I facilitate on my side.
Interesting.
So then from there, there's pre-recorded scripts and different like visual aspects that can bring them through. Like for kids, what's really helpful are some of the things like being able to walk through like a bullying situation or taking a test, or dark spaces. I do use like the heights with the kids too. So there's a bunch of different ones, and then also increasing mindfulness, increasing attention. So those are the ones that I currently have access to, and then that's continuing to expand and grow.
Okay, interesting. So I'm curious. It seems like you can definitely work with, just about anybody, but you have a focus on girls' mental health, kind of specifically, right? So why are you so passionate about helping girls with their mental health?
So for one, I was a girl. I am a woman, like it's important to me, because of my own personal identity in that. I also think it's very important for girls to, as early as possible, have more tools to form their identity so that when they're entering into the world of productivity and work and everything else, that they have a head start on being able to identify their purpose and how they're going to just create value in the world, and just being able to instill that leadership in them a lot earlier so that they don't have to go on this long circuitous journey of self-discovery like I had to. Which I'm not like bitter or angry about. It's more like I just want to be able to take all of these tools and everything that I've learned along the way and have that, give that back and help the girls who are struggling, that like I was struggling at that time, and then being able to help balance, like, our world is still very masculine. There's still a lot of um patriarchy, I guess is the way to put it. And there's a need for more femininity in leadership and in the world, and just more equity in general. And that's going to start with I mean, it's starting already with older generations, but we have to instill that in younger generations so that we leave a legacy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and so that leads me to kind of, what you had put down as a dream that you have, which you said that you want to be a role model for other moms, women, and children struggling with the negative aspects of neurodiversity. Does it all just kind of play into that same mission that you have to support girls in in mental health challenges and stuff like that? Why don't you kind of expand on that dream a little bit, if you don't mind?
Yeah. So neurodiversity, first of all, encompasses people with ADHD, autism, learning differences. Um, I like the terminology because in my mind, it reminds me of just like what's going on behind the hood, like in our brain, and how no one brain is the same, and we're all a little bit different, either by design or by just our environments and the interactions that we've had and learning and everything. So nature and nurture. Um, and I, I like that it's broad. I like that it's not necessarily labeling somebody in a negative way, right? There's like an identity piece that people can latch onto and say, like, yeah, my brain is different, your brain is different, that's all good, like we're all good. Okay. And we're learning about kind of like some basic life skills in the world around how to manage, like, for example, like one of the things that people bring to me is like they're feeling really overwhelmed, right? This is like women too, especially women, right? They're feeling really overwhelmed. I do this too, because we take on so many different things because women have a hard time saying no. We just want to please everybody. And and then, next thing you know, we have like 50 tabs open. And we're like, how do we deal with all of these different things? And then balls are dropping all over the place, right? And people are like, oh, I'm identifying as ADHD and I'm struggling with this, that. And I'm like, that's all well and good. It's helpful to have some labels so that we can communicate that to people. Like I said earlier, like I learned that I have ADHD. Like I have no feelings of stigma about it. It's pretty like open to the world at this point. But some people are still really struggling with like, well, like I had said earlier, right? Like I really struggled with blurting out and saying things that were hurtful to people, or like one of my insecurities, like I brought it up a few times on this call, is like I'll start rambling on because I lose track of what I'm talking about, right? And how when you're able to like label that and identify it and not like put blame on it, but more just understand like the mechanisms of how it works and what you need to do to help like make up for that, how much that improves your self-esteem and your self-worth.
Yeah. Okay. So, and how do you recognize that? Like, and as it would relate to connectors, as you're meeting with new people, one thing that's so common is people have a tendency to just talk and talk and talk and talk, right? Without ever realizing that they've been talking the whole time and ask about the other person. So I'm curious, like how you go about recognizing when you maybe have been going on about something that you need to, ask somebody or get the other person to engage in the conversation. Like, what are some things that you do or that you recommend other people do?
It's hard sometimes, especially on a call like this. Like, piece of feedback, Daniel. Sometimes you ask many questions at once, and I have to figure out which one I'm answering.
I don't do that. Yeah.
And so, yeah, that can be challenging. So it's like trying to really sit in the moment with what is being talked about, right? Not to like, just to have an idea of what you're going to be talking about before the person is done talking. That's really hard, but like practicing just being there and just listening and then allowing there to be space and then allowing that space to help you form what it is that you're going to think about. Because I think what happens is that we're afraid of that space. Like it's a feeling of awkwardness, that open space, and then we have so many things that we want to say, and so then we end up like jumping in and like cutting each other off and talk, and like I end up in conversations like that too, but what I'm really trying to achieve is that like synchronicity where you say something, there's an allowance of space, I say something, like there's an allowance of space. It's like a volley, so I don't know if it's necessarily like a formula as it is like a feeling.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think really just being present above all else is kind of the key to that, right? So that you're not just listening to respond, you're listening to listen and then give a response that is appropriate, I don't know. At least that's how I generally try to have conversations, but we're all guilty of it at times. We'll jump in and, cut somebody off even when maybe they were just pausing for a second to collect their thoughts, right?
Yeah. And like one of the things that I learned through counseling was about the power of reflecting back. So like what you just did was you reflecting back, just a short summary of what I had just said. That helps the speaker, to be able to dive deeper into what it is that they just said, and it helps deepen the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree. That's a great way to deepen that conversation and and give somebody the opportunity to express themselves even more without just stopping it and going on to whatever you want to talk about, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Have you ever
Cool.
been to therapy, Daniel?
I have when I was younger and a couple times in 2020.
You know what? I heard somebody else, I think it was Simon, it was either Simon Sinek or Adam Grant. One of them was talking about 2020 and how it was inevitable in 2020 that people would end up in therapy, that like it's just so needed, that like that social isolation really led people to really struggling emotionally. But I mean, what was your experience of therapy?
I think that to really speak on my experience, I would probably want to go more, but um, it was good. I felt like it was helpful and helped me see clearer about certain decisions that I had to make and stuff like that. So it was in the midst of all sorts of stressful situations. So yeah, it definitely helped me out.
It's an important, like, it's important part of like our hygiene, I think. Like, kind of like you have to go to the doctors or you have to go to the dentist or you have to like take a shower every day, things like that. Like, I think it's very important. In fact, I think it's foundational that people, you don't have to constantly be in therapy your whole life, but I do think it's really helpful and important for people to see a therapist, especially during like big transitions,
Hmm.
right? Because those are times when therapists can be really helpful in helping you to ground and gain clarity on like what
Yeah.
your goals are or what it is that you're trying to achieve. And like a lot of times that's how I spend my time in therapy. I'm in therapy regularly now. It's necessary for me because of all the changes, and like my whole life is like this right now, like, you know? And so like I look forward to my therapy sessions and I go in there and I'm like, oh, let me tell you.
Oh, that's funny. I love it. Yeah, I mean, leverage the resources and the people that are in our lives that are there for specific reasons, um,
Mhm.
100%. So
Yeah.
that's
I
funny.
saw this awesome graphic about like how like the people who are closest to you or like your tribe, those are the people who are going to support you most of the time. But when something happens within that tribe, like a death or some relationship issue or, something that kind of disrupts that, that it's really helpful to get somebody from the outside who's an objective observer that can like help you to process through that, because they're somebody who's not going to be influenced by all the turmoil that's happening within that system.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, when you came into my life and the whole unicorn universe, you really just took a whole shine to the whole unicorn connector thing and have been an awesome connector. You do a great job just connecting with new people. And I imagine that translates at in-person events too. I'm curious, have you always been like a natural connector, or let me ask you that
It
question. Have you
is
always
so
been a
interesting
natural
that you
connector?
asked that. I love that you asked that question, Daniel, because I was like thinking about whether or not you were going to ask that question.
Okay.
The answer is very mixed. So naturally, yes, I am an inborn connector. Like I feel very much like in my element doing all of the connecting. In fact, one of my therapists at one point, I remember being very upset about the fact that I couldn't connect people because of all of the emotional struggles that I had experienced, right? And all of the ways that I was engaging in relationships that were really unhealthy, right? So it actually really motivated me down the road. And I remember, down the road to grow and heal and all of that. But I remember my therapist being like, why does it matter to you if you get all of these people in the same room at the same time? I'm like, I don't know. It's just like something that I have to do. It's like it was like inborn in me. But like because of how I struggled, like I gained a sense of social anxiety because I was holding myself back because I didn't want to hurt anybody because I had hurt so many people. So yes, I'm an inborn connector. No, I have not always been connecting. And in fact, like when I started out this whole like business stuff, like actually like getting work on done, like getting the ball rolling on my business was really like around like August of this year. So it's been a really short time. I mean, I started the business stuff earlier, but August was really when I started digging in. And like at that time, I was just spending so much time stuck in this mindset of perfectionism around my website. And I was using that as a way. I didn't know it at the time. I was like, I'm doing work, like I'm really working on things, right? But I had already known, like going into the whole world of like this, I was like, I need to do a lot of networking. I need to call all of these people that I have met and talked to, and you know, like I need to be making X amount of calls a day. And I think actually really facing that like I was embarking on this thing that was deeply vulnerable, like literally like creating a business out of myself, that I was like scared. And so I was just staying there in the house all day, like every day with Avon, my she's 6 months old now, but she was younger then, maybe 2.5, 3 months old. And, it was like all day at the house with her. So then I was like, I need to do something to get myself out of the house just to like face this social fear. And so I started going to the coffee shop every day. And she helped to be that connector for me because the women at the coffee shop would come up and say, "Oh, she's so cute. Can I hold her? I want to." And I was like, sure. And so then like I was able to talk about my business and I started learning about how to talk about my business, and like she was getting what she needed. And, I started to grow like a little mini community there at the coffee shop over like the course of 3 weeks, because like I was literally going in from like 8 o'clock in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon so that I would have some place just to like get myself out of the house, out of like my mental funk, and like be there with people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. That's really interesting.
Yeah. So like basically the tip there and all of that is like, if you're sitting back at home and you're like, how do I get out of the house? Like great ways to talk to people, to have something to talk about. Like you have a dog, right? Like I'm not suggesting everybody go out and get a dog. Like that's a big responsibility, but like having something that helps generate conversation. Like I saw a tip somewhere about like, it's really helpful to wear a bauble. Like I'm wearing this today and it's nothing interesting about this, but like, that's one of my missions is to go out there and find a bauble. My bauble right now is my baby.
That's funny. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I can pretty much always talk about my dog, like at any point. So
It helps to like have something that like I really prefer deep, genuine conversations. I have a hard time with small talk. So I literally have to like plan small talk. And I teach clients to do that all the time. Come prepared with 2 to 3 really easy things to talk about that you could talk about that somebody else is going to want to talk about. If you're not sure what those things are, like Google's your friend.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's definitely a useful tip, and just having some small talk questions you can ask is a good thing to do if you're not feeling ready for it, especially if you're going to like a networking event or something like that. And then just dig in, like we talked about before. Sometimes just reflecting back to somebody, if they sounded excited about the answer they give, there's probably more to it, right? And I'm sure you've learned so much about things like that, different ways that you can kind of go deeper in conversations with people, just with what you're doing. I don't know if you want to share anything on that. We're basically out of time. I've gone over on every one of my.
Yeah, I was gonna say I watched a few of them, and they definitely went over.
Yeah, I have a hard time cutting it off when it's a good conversation. So, yeah. So I don't know if you want to share anything in that regard. Just ways that people are able to kind of dig deeper in the conversation. That would be awesome. Otherwise, we can kind of go through some wrapping up stuff. But I'd love to know if.
So people like to be paid attention to. They like people to be curious about them. Actually, I'll give you there's a psychologist, I don't know his proper title. His name is Dan Hughes, and he talks about it's a model for helping to teach parents how to engage with their children. So it's based on attachment learning. And the idea with the kids, you can apply it with adults as well, but you just want to be careful. You don't want to be like condescending to anybody. But so it's playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy, And so, going backwards, empathy is being able to be in conversation and being able to reflect back emotionally. So being present and grounded so that you know what's going on for you emotionally, and that you're not necessarily projecting that, that you're holding that, and that you're empathizing with what's going on with them in that moment. Like, so for my son, as an example, like he has these temper tantrums, and like going over next to him, kind of getting down on his level and talking to him like an equal, and then helping to like co-regulate with his loudness, right? And then kind of bring that loudness down. Like, so that's like an empathetic approach, right? Curiosity is, being curious, asking questions. Like, what would be the ideal is like, if you're going to get onto a LinkedIn call and you're going to go and talk to somebody, for all of those of you who know that I wasn't doing this last week, I've learned that I'm doing this now. Go onto your LinkedIn profile and like find a few tidbits about that person, and like be curious about those on the call when you're talking to them, right? It really helps the conversation move along. And then empathy, curiosity, acceptance, right? So accepting what is going on for yourself, accepting what's going on for them in that moment, not trying to change it, because when you're trying to change it, that's when a lot of suffering and a lot of anger and a lot of like things are coming up. So just like being there in that moment. I work through this with kids and parents and things like that about like, how do we actually apply this to situations? But we're specifically talking right now about how do we improve communication.
Yeah.
And playfulness is the first one, right? So playfulness is really about the way that we're engaging through our voice and through our connectivity, right? So matching the intonations with somebody else, like if they're super excited and energetic, like it's going to be a bit of a drag if you're like, oh. And I'm not criticizing you at all, Daniel. I'm just saying that is like, it's like part of being in connection with somebody is really matching their energy, and then if you want that energy to come down a little bit, you can do it, but don't like, if you're here and they're here, like you want to come up here and then help bring them down.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So playfulness is really about like that intonation, and like the way that I think of it from a psychological perspective is like, if you're playing with a baby and you talk to the baby, like the baby's going to respond to you if you have like certain intonations in your voice. So it's like, oh, you're so sweet, I love you, blah, 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 blah. Like that's like playfulness,
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that
and
makes
also
sense.
like bringing games in and having fun and all of that. That's all part of it.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, definitely want to try to match as best as you can, right? Without overdoing it or faking it, right? So, yeah, I think that makes sense. Cool. All right. So I'm curious. You had stated, I wanted to ask about your golden connection because I always think it's important to mention. So you had put down that your golden connection would be people who can help you be a better public speaker, as well as provide opportunities for you to speak. Curious, if have you done like public speaking on a stage in front of people like that before? Is
All
that
right, you want to
something?
hear my public speaking on a stage story?
Yeah, let's hear it.
All right. I was in the 4th grade. I told you I'm a natural express connector, like I'm outgoing, like I have all these things naturally. So the teacher knew that I was going to be the best person because I was literally the loudest person in the class to go and deliver the Gettysburg Address at the local mall. So I
Nice.
memorized the whole speech. I was in the 4th grade. We had to get this dress. It was like a 1800 style dress. I still remember it was like white with like, the somebody please like help with what style this is, but it's like the old China.
You're not gonna get it from me. This
No.
is way over
But
my head.
like the old China that's like white with like the blue different like flowers on it. It's like really old style. Like that's what the dress looked like. It was like
Okay.
this really old style type of dress. And as a 4th grader, you're there with all of your friends. You're like, I look like an idiot.
That's funny.
But
Cool.
I did it. That's kind of like how I am. And obviously, like, you're probably laughing now. You're like, what? Your resume is like from when you were in the 4th grade? Like, yep.
Well, hey, you got to start somewhere, I mean, just because you haven't had that or the experience you have is from 4th grade doesn't mean that you can't do that, So,
The way I
and
see it is I speak to people all the time, right? I just need
yeah,
to make the audience bigger.
yeah, right. Well, and going back to the whole virtual reality thing, I feel like that would be a great way to kind of overcome some of those either limiting beliefs or just fear factors that we have, right? Speaking in front of a big crowd.
Yeah, one of the thoughts that I've been having is like if any speaking coaches want to like collaborate with me, I can help them, get their clients into an actual stage. I know that they also like could probably set that up for their clients in certain ways, but like, this is a less expensive way than, oh, I'm going to rent this stage for a little while so you can practice.
Right, right. Yeah. Well, and that's something Brandon can help with. He does a speaker school. I was in it. I did that twice. So just a thought. More things for Brandon to help with, right? And some other people that maybe I should connect you with. At least
Have
people
you?
to follow.
I was
What's
going
that?
to say, I keep on getting all of these connections from you. It's been really magical.
Well, that's what we do. It's all about making connections, right?
I know. I was telling you about how like I'm working with like the people who helped with your branding. Like I'm working with like all these different people that you've connected me to, and I'm trying to reciprocate the favor, and it's a struggle because like not everyone's going to see what I see, but I just want to send them your way so that they can see like, hey, I'm really passionate about this group. And yeah, I guess like it's still relatively new. So, the more that I connect with the people on my side of things and explain to them what's going on, the more that they're going to warm up to it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you doing that. Like, seriously, you have been definitely a star super unicorn connector. So I appreciate you. So, all right. Well, let's see here. Anything else I wanted to ask? What do you have coming up that we can share with the world? Anything new and exciting that you've got coming up? Same question worded differently.
Yeah. So, you were going to ask me about what's going on in my office, so I'll give you that one. And I won't do the full tour because we are getting low on time and that's extra. But if anybody wants the full tour, that's one of my favorite parts of bringing people into my office here in this virtual space, is sharing, just this space that I created to be like my own little art studio sanctuary for myself and for my clients and all of that. And if you look, wait, which way? This way. Okay. At my drawing table back there, which I'm very proud of, by the way, I put it all together myself. Like, like with all the wrenches and everything, you're like trying to figure out how to put this thing together.
Yeah.
On top of there, I put out each one of those black pieces of paper is going to be a post that I'm going to start creating coming up in the new year, starting on January 1st. I'm going to do 365 days of creativity. I've seen other people do similar things. Like you were talking about Freeman earlier. He does 365 days of positivity. He helped push me towards doing this. But there was also another person that I knew a while back that was creating art every single day and then posting about that art every single day. And I really enjoyed that journey for her. And I've always kind of thought like, hey, I should do something like that. And recently I've been thinking about like, how do I reconnect to like my purpose and what brought me into doing art therapy to begin with. And, in grad school, they were always like, always bring it back to the art, always do more art. But art is probably one of the first thing that falls to the wayside when I have a million other things and 50 tabs open on the screen, right? And so this is my way of being really intentional about bringing art back into the practice. And so 365 days of creativity, we're going to be really integrating. So the way that I have it mapped out and scheduled out is based on the calendar of a spiritual belief that I follow and that I don't necessarily like ascribe to, but there's like a lot of spiritual wisdom and things in this that like I was able to map out on a calendar so that every day has a different theme. And then I'll be posting about like that theme, about like the art itself, about the process, about like basically the idea is to try to help engage people more in just the ease and access of art. That like you don't have to be like in Leonardo da Vinci, you don't have to be like somebody who is so magnificent at art to access like that creativity and what that can do to help open up different parts of your mind. So I want to have an offering for LinkedIn that I can share with people that feels really connected to like what I do.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, interesting. So 365 days of creativity, is that going to be kind of like a newsletter like you're saying, or just something that you're putting out there and sharing just to kind of document your journey as you do that?
So I've been consulting with a few different people. Originally, I was talking about doing a daily email. And then the more I thought about it, I thought that's going to feel a little bit overwhelming. I don't like getting daily emails. And so I'm going to do a daily post and then I'll do a weekly email that kind of helps sum everything up so that people can continue to stay connected to that.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I like it.
Yeah. So
awesome.
I have a post up right now. It's in my featured section. And I'm sure you'll also be able to put links up to all of these things. But there's a landing page on my page and you can sign up for the newsletter through that.
Okay.
And you can just follow my journey on LinkedIn.
All right, cool. Good deal. So, and is LinkedIn the best place for people to go to connect with you and follow you and stay up to date on things?
Yeah, for now. And I mean, they can connect with me too through my email. And there's on my LinkedIn page, you can book a discovery. Well, you can book like a 30-minute coffee chat, and so we can talk that way. And that's really my preference. Like I've said, was it last week or the week before that I said to all the unicorns and I said, please fill up my schedule. It helps my life go easier so I don't have to go cold calling a bunch of people. Brandon has me calling 5 people a day.
He's awesome. He's going to be on next week, actually. So,
I'll have to make sure I show up for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, I mean, however you got to make it happen, right? So I love it. Well, you can reach out to Aubrey on LinkedIn. I've got her link in the ticker. It's at Aubrey Christine Baptista. I'll put the link in the description of the podcast episode, or you can find her if you're watching on LinkedIn as one of the speakers. Otherwise, yeah, that's going to be the best way. Aubrey Baptista. She now has an art emoji at the end of her name, which I like. I like that a lot. So, yeah. Anything else? Any last things that you wanted to say, Aubrey?
Just that, like, all those letters, I kept noticing every time somebody tagged me that I was like taking up so much space in the tag, which, you know, is not necessarily a bad thing, but I was like, this is a little obnoxious.
Sometimes there's a character count max, and you know, deleting that part of people's names isn't unfamiliar to me. So I definitely noticed when it went to the art thing. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I saw
Art
some
palette.
other people with some cool emojis, and I was like, what's my emoji gonna be? I'm gonna pick this art palette.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, cool. All right. Well, if you want to connect with somebody awesome, really, I highly recommend connecting with Aubrey. If you're looking to help her support her on her mission to revolutionize mental health care through innovative counseling methods, be it input or as a client, specifically where she lives, then, by all means, reach out to Aubrey. So anything else, Aubrey, you want to say before we wrap it up?
So that's in North Carolina that people can work with me as a counselor, but I'm also going to start opening up like a coaching side of things so people can reach out to me and start asking me about that in the new year.
Awesome. All right, cool. Sounds like a plan. And of course, follow her and check out the 365 Days of Creativity. That sounds like a lot of fun. So, all right. Well, thank you so much, Aubrey, for being here. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Really appreciate it and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Daniel.